Hi, and welcome back to the shop again. Today we're going to do a little more about talking about that AJS before I actually start doing the tune-up work on it. I'm trying to keep these little videos kind of short because people don't seem to be wanting to watch the longer ones. So let's talk about this. As you can see, it's definitely a custom. It's not. It was not restored to standard specifications for a 1955 model 20B, which is a 550cc bike. Anyway, I used what I had that came in the back of that truck, and I'm telling you, it was completely in pieces. A real, honest to goodness basket case. That's what a basket case is when everything is taken apart. If you've got a bike that shows up in your driveway and it can roll on two wheels, that's a roller, not a basket case. Anyway, getting on with this. The front wheel had already been laced to that 21-inch rim. It wasn't tightened up and it wasn't trued. And it also had that alloy front fender with it and the P11 gas tank. This is how I knew that guy was trying to get the bike to resemble something like the one that was in that 1996, I think it was December, Classic Bike Magazine. Anyway, this is when I had a good look at all the stuff. This is what convinced me to go with this kind of a layout. I couldn't get the seat at the time that the chap in the motorcycle magazine had put on his, so I thought, well, I always kind of liked those old Cobra seats that they used to put on the choppers. So, hey, I thought, I'll just make my own. So that's a 1/4-inch aluminum plate underneath the seat there. That forms a seat pan. And I stitched that seat up myself one Saturday afternoon with my 6-pound test fishing line, which I usually do. So it's hand stitched, and hey, it came out pretty darn good for a handmade seat. I'm not displeased with that at all. But what's the other thing? Getting into some other stuff. These came from India. They were eBay purchases. I've been in conversation with the chap that owned that business at the time, and he's a really good guy. He did some really good work. He explained to me about how the work was done and when the work was done. And anyway, it was, he said to me, he said, if you ever need anything done, he said, just let me know it's you and I'll make sure I put my best guy on the job. So anyway, when I originally got the bike running, it had a monoblock carburetor on it, and that stayed on there for quite a few years because that was the original carb to the bike, but it was worn right out like everything else on this bike was. Like I said, I have never worked on a motorcycle that was this worn out in my life. I had to have the crank chromed and brought back to the standard size because it was worn beyond repair. At the time, I couldn't get the 550 cylinders for it, so I had to settle with the 500 set that came with the bunch of parts that were with the bike. And sometimes I wish it had that extra 50 cc's, but it doesn't. But it's got enough power to get itself along pretty good. I can go up every hill that I've come to in high gear and not have to shift down, so that's good enough. You're never going to pull any wheelies, and acceleration-wise, I don't think you could scare your grandmother on it. But what else? New valves. The camshafts were so worn that they were replaced with another set that were in with the bunch of parts. Someone had been collecting things to make it work. The generator came from a completely different bike. That came from Austria, actually, and I wish I could see the rest of that bike because that generator was just like brand new. The clutch itself, it was completely worn out in every respect. The basket was so worn from the plates rattling around in it that it was just a piece of junk. The bearing was gone in the back of it. It was so worn out. And of course the plates, friction and driven plates, were completely worn out. I did manage to find a basket for it over in Thailand, I think it came from. Anyways, I got that in the mail and got that on there, but the clutch hub, of course, that was worn out as well, so that had to be replaced. And anyhow, what did I do? I made some modifications to the clutch after a couple of years because it was dragging. The way those clutches, those Berman clutches, are designed so that all the spring pressure goes on the last plate. And the last plate in them is a little bit thicker than the rest, but it's not thick enough to prevent it from deforming like a diaphragm spring. So this is where you get this problem with it dragging. Anyways, I made my own back plate for the clutch. It's 1/8 of an inch thick. It will not deform, so the clutch works perfectly now. So when you pull the handle in, it actually releases the clutch all the way. What else? Oh, some pretty important stuff here. Of course, that's a homemade chain guard on there, just enough. The back fender is stainless steel, and that's just a little aftermarket tail light. The mufflers, those are aftermarket barrel type mufflers. They're quite inexpensive and they work well on this bike. The head pipes were brand new from Austria, from British only Austria, and those excuse me, those were brand new. They were supposed to have flaws in them, but I couldn't see a flaw in them anywhere. So I was quite happy to get them at a cut rate. This battery cover is something that I picked up from Dommy Racer years ago, but none of the batteries I had would fit in it. It was about 1/8 of an inch too small. So eventually I made my own battery cover up for it, and I put the cover on. I'll show you that later on in the work here, because I have to put the battery back in it. But let's get on with this. I have converted the bike from magneto to distributor ignition, battery and coil type ignition, because the magneto that I had in the bike, in spite of doing everything I could to renew that magneto, it just, it would work when the engine was cold. It had a beautiful big blue spark on it, but as soon as the engine would warm up, it would just be a little weak red spark, and if you shut the engine off, you really had a hard time to get it to start again with the engine hot, right? So, and that is a new electronic type voltage regulator for 6 volts. That seems to work very well, knock on wood. And anyway, there's been nothing done to this bike to stop me from completely restoring it back to a Model 20B, but they're kind of stodgy and, I don't know what you'd call it, agricultural looking, I guess. But I like the way this looks. It resembles the Trials model. It looks a lot like the one that was in that magazine back in 1996, and I'll show you a picture of that magazine. But anyway, the bike works really well. It took a long time to sort all the bugs out on it, but and it took a lot of money to do it because it was so worn out. Somebody once asked me, are those AJS twins any good? You know, how long do they last? And I said, well, I don't know for sure, but they last long enough to wear every bloody thing out in them. Even the gearbox was completely shot in this bike. That's a gearbox that came with the pile of parts, but it's a lot lower mileage on that gearbox, and it works really well. One of the great things about this machine is it has a filter in the return line on the oil tank. It also has a filter in the supply line to the engine. So you're getting double filtered oil, filtered to the engine and filtered back to the oil tank, and they're quite easy to get out. Like I said, that's the distributor there. That came from a Triumph TRW. It was something I had in my pile of spare parts, And rather than send that magneto away and spend about $600 having it rebuilt, I just decided to go with that. But in the meantime, over the last few years, I've amassed a pretty good collection of K2F magnetos. That's the one that came from the bike. This one here was probably from a BSA A10 or an A7, possibly a Triumph. I don't really know. But, you know, that's a good spare. This one, like I said, it works when it's cold. So I think that it's probably the capacitor that's gone in this one here. But this one may have a good capacitor in it. Plus, I have another body with the rotor in it, so that may be good too. So what's the difference between these two? Well, the AJS one has the advance mechanism fitted to the end of the case here, so that you have a manual advance. The BSA and the Triumph ones had automatic advance on the drive wheel, which fitted inside the engine, so you didn't need that advance. So if I was going to use this magneto, I would have to use this end here with the timing advance on it. I'm just going to see if I can unscrew that and show you what lives in here. All this stuff in here was brand new. There's your ignition points right there. This ring here is your cam ring. There's two high spots on the cam ring because it's a two-cylinder. There's two pickups coming from the rotor, two HD pickups that supply the sparks to the spark plugs. And I'm just going to rotate that around a bit so you can see how that works. See, when the shoe right there on the cam comes up against that high spot on the cam, it pushes the points open. Now, I know you can't see that, but just have to take my word for it that this is where right about there, where the points are just starting to open. That's where you set your timing on full advance. And don't quote me on this because I may be wrong, but I think full advance is set at 7/16 of an inch before top center. I think. Don't quote me on that. If you're going to do a timing check on these bikes, make sure you check your book. Make sure that figure I just said is correct, because it may very well not be. But anyway, that's what's inside a K2F. What I had to do to make the Triumph one fit, like this area here, is perfect. You just bolt it right on, but the shaft, it was a straight shaft on the Triumph one, and it came out a little bit further. So what I had to do was machine that straight shaft so it had a taper on it here, taper just like this one here, so that the timing gear for the magneto would slip onto the taper, and then I could just tighten it up with this. And it doesn't matter really where you put it with the distributor, because you can turn the distributor around 360 degrees. Anyway, that's enough talking about that. Oh, what else can I say about AJS in general? The brakes, they're, I think, 7-inch brakes on that bike, but they're terrific. I mean, I can stop on a bloody dime with this bike, and for a 1955, that's pretty darn good. The oil pumps are separate, so you can work on them separately. This would be the return pump. That's a supply. Anyway, again, works terrific. At least I think I got that the right way around. Maybe I don't. Might be the other way around. Anyway, two separate oil pumps, one here, one there. One to supply the engine, the other to return the oil to the tank. The gearbox, it's interesting to pull apart different gearboxes, because you see different ways of doing the same thing, basically. But the Berman gearbox actually works quite well. It has an indicator here to tell you when you're back in neutral and all that good stuff. Shift pattern is 1 up and 3 down. That kick is actually off a Honda 750. I didn't have the kick pedal to fit on the Berman transmission, So I just cut a different set of splines, 40 splines in that little block there on the Kickstarter, and it works perfectly. So yeah, I was glad I had that in my spare parts. And of course there's the tire pump if you ever need it. Hopefully you don't, and if you do need it, well, hopefully you have a patching kit. The engine is smooth. It really is a smooth running machine. It's built like a tank. It's got that center main bearing in it, so you know, the wear and tear is very minimal, so you can go a long ways on these engines before they're worn out. Let's see, center main bearing with thrust bearings on each side of it, and then you have the roller bearings on the outboard side of the crankshaft. So they're really well built. And let me think. I did put new valves in there and guides and all that good stuff because the old head was worn out, or the heads, I should say. If you need to work on one head or one cylinder on these bikes, you can, because like Royal Enfield, the cylinders and the heads are separate. And yes, the jam pot shocks. They are quite simple to take apart, but you need the proper compressor to do it, and I happen to have one of those. It's a big, clunky homemade rig, but it works perfectly for compressing the springs. So if you need to change the seals or you want to put new fluid in there, they're basically a scaled-down version of the front forks. So quite easy to do. So I like that about them. And I know some of you are probably wondering why I put those blocky looking aftermarket tires on there, but I was going to put the square looking motocross type tires on it, but I didn't want to commit that far. So these are a nice sort of a compromise between the two, and they wear really well. And what else was I going to say about them? They track really well. If you get on an area of pavement where they've dug the pavement up, and most bikes tend to squirm a bit when you're driving down that stuff, this print here, you don't even feel that squirminess on the bike when you're driving down a road that's being resurfaced. Again, 6-volt electrics, nothing wrong with that. This is a standard 6-volt bulb in here. I could switch that over if I wanted to an LED, because they're putting out a lot of LEDs now that are not polarity sensitive, but this bike is positive ground, as I made it before, just like the factory made it. Anyway, I think I mentioned that was a Norton P11 tank. I can do about 180 kilometers in that before I need to start thinking about finding a gas station. So she gets pretty reasonable gas mileage. I'm thinking probably about 65 miles a gallon. So anyway, I'm going to wrap this little video up on this bike. So thank you for watching. Be good to each other, and the next time, I promise, I'm going to get down in there at that distributor and take the valve covers off and do a little tune-up on this machine.